Hello, my name is Elder Price, and I would like to share with you the most amazing book. Hello, my name is Elder Grant. It's a book about America a long, long time ago. It has so many awesome parts. You simply won't believe how much this book can change your life. Hello, my name is Elder Green. I would like to share with you this book of Jesus Christ. Hello, my name is Elder Young. Did you know that Jesus lived here in the USA? You can read all about it now. In this nifty book, it's free, no, you don't have to pay. Hello, my name is Elder Smith, and can I read this book with you?
Hello again. My name is Doug Bundy, formerly known as Elder Bundy when I was out there ringing doorbells many years ago, but now your host for Voices from the Dust TV this Friday, the 12th day of December, 2014. We welcome you to our show, and this is where we share the reason for the hope within us, the reason why Latter-day Saints are Christians, and also the reason why you should be too. Our message not only explains the Latter-day Saint Christian message and how it's distinguished from the non-Latter-day Saint Christian message and doctrine, but it also explains why, since 1845, the LDS Church has declared that the only salvation remaining for the Gentiles is for them to repent and to be baptized and thus to be numbered with the house of Israel, to be identified in the same covenant and to worship at the same altar as Israel. So we've been declaring that message for some time now, and it's all recorded. We started with Blog Talk Radio, and it's now been more than a year that we've been doing it on Hangouts on Air, so we have the video as well. But you can go to our website and access all the past programs. The website is voicesfromthedust.org, voicesfromthedust.org. Go there and click on the menu item TV, where you can watch it on the live player embedded in that page, or you can go to links to our Facebook channel, our YouTube channel, or our Google Plus page, and there you can also watch it on those sites as well. We're now changing our show's format a little bit, as we've been talking about here most of this week, in order to better meet our viewer expectations. The show is going to start with the headline and synopsis and discussion of those things right away, in order that people don't have to put up with things that they don't want to see. They're attracted by the headline and the synopsis description, so that's what we need to start with. So that's what we're going to do, and then after that, our what we call our Whispers Out of the Ground study of the Book of Mormon and the Awful Situation update, where we take a look at the news. So today, the title of our show is Sexual Perversion and the Prophets of Zion, and that has to do with just a second here. That has to do with two opposing causes that are about to collide in unprecedented proportions here, and we want to talk about that. But the one cause, of course, is the cause of righteousness, which is opposite the cause of abomination and perversion. The intent of one is to make straight the paths of the Lord, while the intent of the other is to pervert the ways of the Lord. The house of Israel cast out the prophets in the days of old and stoned them and killed them because they cried repentance to powerful people, to kings, namely, who would pervert the ways of the Lord. Remember how King Herod beheaded John the Baptist because he spoke out against his marriage to his brother's wife, which was was not right. And so he lost his head for that. Then King Manasseh, it said, sawed Isaiah in half because of the message that Isaiah had to him. And then the apostle wrote in the book of Hebrews, they, he said, referring to the saints or the prophets, were stoned. They were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, he said. And of course, we remember the Lord saying that because of that, they would not have any more prophets, that they would not see the Lord until they said, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. In other words, that they were willing to accept the message of God sent by the prophets of God, sent by God by means of the prophets. But they don't. They torment them. They fight against them because they don't want their message. It says, Matthew Henry commented in his commentary, the world, he says, quote, the world is not worthy of those scorned, persecuted saints whom their persecutors reckon unworthy to live. They are not worthy of their company, example, counsel, or other benefits, he says, for they know not what a saint is, nor the worth of a saint, nor how to use him. They hate and drive such away as they do the offer of Christ and his grace. End quote. Well, so things are unfortunately no different today as we see them mounting up, as we've explained, as the voices of the dust have brought it into sharp focus, and the things that we're going to see happen in the timeline in what we call the times of the Gentiles. As we saw yesterday, President Ezra Taft Benson explaining that was between the time of the restoration, the beginning of the restoration in 1820, to the time when the Gentiles would reject the fullness of the gospel, and thus the Lord would take it from them and then take it, he says, to his people. And that's going to be a big transition to the world that they do not understand. And we've talked about a lot of aspects on it on our show. America is supposed to be a free country, but men can be free in this land only as they choose to do what is right. When they choose to do wickedly, as they increasingly are, they lose their freedom, and the land of the free then becomes the land of the oppressed. According to the voices from the dust, which we've read several times, the Lord declared that this land, that America, is consecrated unto him whom he shall bring. This is a quote from the Lord out of 2 Nephi. And if it so be that they shall serve him according to the commandments which he has given, it shall be a land of liberty unto them, wherefore they shall never be brought down into captivity. Now, we see then that, you know, these FEMA camps that are being built all over and staffed and equipped and everything for the time that is rapidly approaching, when people will be hustled, that's not the word I want, but shuttled or forced to these concentrated into these concentration camps, as they were in Nazi Germany. And it's happening here. And so the Lord says that would never happen to them, that to Americans, that this land would be a land of liberty unto Americans if they would serve him according to the commandments which he has given. But they would never be brought down into captivity. If so, it says, it shall be because of iniquity. For if iniquity shall abound, cursed shall be the land for their sakes, for the wicked. See, for the people who have been brought here by the hand of the Lord in his mercy and given possession of this choice land that is choice above all other lands. And it would be a land of freedom for them, a land of liberty unto them, if they kept his commandments. But if they reject it, then it becomes cursed for their sakes. But unto the righteous, he says, it shall be blessed forever. So there's this great division that's implied by these words between the righteous and the wicked. And right now you don't see much of that, except that, you know, we have those who have accepted the words of Christ that have been restored, and they are now numbered with the house of Israel, but they don't go around with yellow stars or whatever it was the Nazis made the Jews wear at that time, not yet anyway, but they are identified as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, this is really quite a different situation than most people perceive, who are asleep, as we say, and are involved so much in the distractions of this life that they cannot see these huge issues that are looming before us. On a recent crosstalk program, a national call-in program that you can find on the internet, Matthew Staver of the Liberty Counsel was interviewed. And in the interview, he characterized the same-sex marriage laws that started in the Netherlands and are now here in the U.S. as something that will hit everyone. A collision, two trains on the same track, he said, and they are heading in opposite directions. One will win and one will lose. There's no navigating, no compromise, no coexistence, he says. This is a clash of unprecedented proportions. All right, so let's now listen to that. I made a little video clip out of it, and we'll play the first part of it and then talk more about it on the other side.
BCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at bcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we want to thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on the BCY America Network. Jim Schneider with you today. And ladies and gentlemen, we are a nation in peril. Our guest today has written that 2014 will go down as one of the most divisive years in America's 238-year history. So what's happening to our nation? It's our privilege to have back with us on Crosstalk attorney Matt Staver. He is a founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, also vice president at Liberty and professor of law at the Liberty School of Law. Matt, thank you for joining us here today on Crosstalk.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Matt, recently you sent out an email and you wrote that our government is now under the influence of elitists who are drunk with a false sense of ideological supremacy. What do you mean by that?
Well, certainly President Obama is the chief leader in that, and he has gathered all around him people that are just like him. And he really is someone who has a very radical, not just liberal, but radical agenda. Very anti-Judeo-Christian values, very anti-American, and he pushes that agenda in every way he possibly can. He pushes it through our State Department dollars with regards to foreign nations. He pushes it in the United States of America. He's really trying to remake America. When he said that there was change coming, he meant that there was change coming, but it's not the kind of change that most people would want. Good change. This is change to literally change who we are as a people, to literally walk away from our heritage. And this president has usurped his own authority and the authority of others and gone way beyond his presidential powers to engage in executive orders when he can't get his way. And you're going to see that more and more in the next couple of years. That's why this Congress is going to have to really hold his feet to the fire. We're going to have to hold these new members' feet to the fire as well.
We're going to enumerate some of these very issues, and Matt, you brought it forth about this change to take place. The president, I mean, he promised to fundamentally transform our nation, and he's systematically doing that in so many different ways. morality has come under attack for many years now, and one topic under this is that of marriage. And we've got conflicting opinions right now, as you know, Matt, from the courts on this matter of marriage. More often than not, it's an activist judge that is ordering states you must begin these so-called same-sex marriages. And I was just, baffled here by, it was the Poughkeepsie Journal of New York reported Sunday that these so-called same-sex marriages were at least 9% of marriages in New York State since the law took effect in July of 2011. Where is this issue of marriage at here in our nation?
Well, where this issue is we're at a critical point in American history where this issue of marriage is now under direct attack. And I think we have to push back. We have to stand up. This will be a direct and is a direct clash with religious freedom of unprecedented proportions. Religious freedom and same-sex marriage cannot occupy the same ground. Same-sex marriage will elevate sexual behavior, or immorality, I should say, to the same level of protection as race, which it could not do legally or should not do morally with respect to race. Will be the same thing with regards to all sorts of sexual aberrant behavior. And that means whether it's tax exemption, for example, a Baptist church can hire Baptists, they can discriminate on the basis of religion. Catholic church can hire Catholics, they can discriminate on the basis of religion. But a Catholic church can't hire only white Catholics, nor can a Baptist church hire only white Baptists. That would be discrimination on the basis of race. They wouldn't be able to do that. The same thing will happen with regards to the sexual immorality. While Baptists for now and Catholics for now and others for now might be able to hire people consistent with their religion, but they won't be able to hire people that are saying, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Presbyterian, but I'm also in a same-sex relationship. You're not going to be able to say that violates our religious belief any more than you could say you're a person of a different color skin and that violates our religious belief, therefore we're not going to hire you. That would be a discrimination. And so consequently, when you add sexual orientation or same-sex marriage by doing so does this to the same level as race, what you cannot do legally or should not do morally with respect to race will be the same thing with regards to all sorts of sexual immorality. And the implications are staggering.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is happening to businesses all across the nation right now as well, whether they be bakers or florists or people who operate premises that for a wedding chapel, photographers. I mean, there's no end to the number of businesses that are going to be impacted by this very thing.
Yeah, there's no end. We've already seen this. Several years ago, we said this was coming. And we had examples from the Netherlands, where in 2001, they began same-sex marriage, the first nation in the world ever to do so. And then we saw things happening in Europe. And then we saw things happening in Canada. They were all around us. Now they're happening here in the United States of America. A farmer in New York recently was fined $10,000 because he wouldn't allow a facility on his farm to be used for a same-sex wedding. The baker in Oregon can't bake cakes unless she participates in a same-sex wedding. And the photographer in New Mexico can't do photography unless she celebrates same-sex union. The bed and breakfast owner in Vermont can't have weddings at the bed and breakfast unless in their own home with their children around, they also have same-sex unions celebrated in their own home. So this is going to be something that will hit everyone. It'll hit churches. For example, churches are going to be impacted not only with accommodations in terms of use of weddings. Just like a church can't say, well, we do weddings, but we're not going to do weddings for Black people or Hispanic people or Caucasian people. We're just not going to do that. That would be a discrimination on the basis of race. Well, they're not going to be able to do the same thing when it comes to someone who says, I want to do a same-sex wedding. When churches are ultimately confronted with this agenda and pastors really see the radicalness and the intolerance of this agenda, I think the church will wake up. Some will compromise, some already have, but I think this is a battle that is here. It's not in the future, it's now, and it's going to continue to escalate in 2015, and there is a collision. There are two trains on the same track, and they're heading in opposite directions. One will win, and one will lose. There's no navigating, there's no compromise, there's no coexistence. This is a clash of unprecedented proportions.
Any indication when and if the U.S. Supreme Court will take up this matter?
Well, the case of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay, that is an understatement. I'm not an understatement. I mean, it's about as strong as you could state it, but it still doesn't. A clash of unprecedented proportions doesn't actually even do justice to what we're looking at here. This is not only going to be a clash; it's going to be a cause. It's a great evil, the Lord calls it. There's just no way to really capture adequately what this means, especially for Latter-day Saints. Now you can say, well, it's for all Christians. Yeah, it is, but for Latter-day Saints, marriage is eternal. And the way it's eternal is through their children and increase. The idea that we are the offspring of our Father, and His work is to bring to pass the same thing for us, so that we can have eternal offspring. And of course, that's impossible with homosexual marriage. It's not only repulsive and immoral in that sense, but for regular Christians whose marriage ended at death, it's not as catastrophic. It's not as unacceptable as catastrophic as it is, and unacceptable as it is. It's still not as catastrophic and unacceptable as it is for the Latter-day Saints, whose marriage does not end at death, and who come forth in the resurrection as married couples and who continue forever. And that's the core of their religion. And therefore, it's very, very clear that this collision course that we're on now as a result of this is not going to end well for the Latter-day Saint Church. Well, the voices of the dust, written so long ago directly to modern Americans, resonate in the hearts of millions of Mormons as this battle of same-sex marriage and religious liberty takes shape in the courts of the U.S. government. We've heard where the Lord said that this would be a land of liberty for the righteous, but it would be cursed forever for the wicked. So this division has to take place. Now, how's it going to happen? Right now, you have Latter-day Saints in probably every business, major business, especially of the nation, probably the world. There are Latter-day Saints in every country, in every government of every country, in every military of every country, and in every business probably of every country, or most businesses, large businesses of every country. So, how is this going to happen? How, as this same-sex battle against religious freedom comes down where the rubber meets the road, how are the Latter-day Saints going to be separated out and the rest of from the rest of the world, who will be forced to or be willing to accept same-sex marriage? It's, the only way you can understand, we'll explain here later. But before we do that, let's go back to the interview now and hear what he was saying. This Matthew Staver was saying about the legal aspects, the way it's developing now, and how the immorality, the sexual perversion, is not just same-sex marriage, but it's the actually obliteration of any meaning of marriage and any meaning of gender, actually. And by law, being forced by law, it's totally almost inexpressible horror for Latter-day Saints. Let me play this now, and we'll listen to the balance of the interview.
This is a clash of unprecedented proportions.
Any indication when and if the U.S. Supreme Court will take up this matter?
Well, the case of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals that governs Kentucky and in those areas in that general region, that case will likely be taken up by the Supreme Court. We don't know when, but probably after the Christmas break, we'll hear something from the U.S. Supreme Court. The petitions are in the process right now of being completed before the Supreme Court, so I think probably in January we'll hear, and then we may ultimately have a decision by the end of June. Now, that would be an interesting situation. What we have now is a conflict among the circuit courts of appeal. We have some circuit courts of appeal striking down the marriage laws. We have the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals upholding the marriage laws. You got a classic conflict. The Supreme Court's going to get involved. Now, the Supreme Court could do what it said in 2013 in the Windsor case, although I disagree with it. What the court ultimately said was the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, that defined marriage as the union of a man and woman, was unconstitutional. Why? Because they said it was a states' rights issue, that it prevented New York from defining marriage the way it wanted to. So New York had defined marriage or changed the definition of it to be same-sex. And the federal government had man and woman. The Supreme Court said it's the right of the state to define marriage. Said it 3 or 4 times. It's the inherent right of the state to define marriage, and the federal government cannot interfere with that right. Now, if they really uphold what they said, that means that they would uphold the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. In other words, that the states have a right to define marriage. That will open up the whole battlefield again, because that means these other courts that said there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, and therefore states cannot limit marriage to only one man, one woman, those will be affected. The battle will again go back to those states. Those decisions will be affected. They'll be undermined, and the people will be able to go back and reinstitute marriage as the union of a man and woman. So this battle is far from over.
Yeah, but at the same time, it seems as if the U.S. Supreme Court has shown their hand on this, though, because states that have said marriage is between one man and one woman, as that was challenged in the courts, and federal judges have overturned those and went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, sorry, we're not going to hear that, therefore you have to allow same-sex marriage. And it's kind of like they are on purpose then creating chaos in all these states, because what would happen then if they say indeed it's a states' rights issue? Then what's going to happen with all these so-called marriages that have taken place?
You know, I think that, including Kennedy, there was a desire by at least 5 of the justices that all of the federal courts would go the same way and they wouldn't have to get involved. If they put out this case in 2013, they gave lip service to states' rights, but at the end of the day, they hoped that all these federal courts would just simply go the way that the majority of them are going. They wouldn't have to get involved. Now they're going to have to get involved. The real question is, what are they going to do? Clearly, 4 that want to have a federal constitutional right to same-sex marriage. We know that. I don't know where Kennedy stands on this. Frankly, he's hard to predict. And what we have seen from this court is a very, very unprincipled position, track record. Why? Because they have no basis in what they're doing in the Constitution. It is all ideology. And I think that's another thing that's coming. Not only is the battle of same-sex marriage here and religious freedom, but it's the legitimacy of the courts. I mean, this court has acted so irrationally, so unpredictably. How long is it going to take the people to just simply lose confidence in this system that has ultimately begun to crumble? I think it's about time that the people push back against these decisions. When a judge, for example, can say that it is time to throw marriage into the trash bin of history, are we going to sit back and just say, oh, I guess that's what we have to do, that's the law? Or are we going to just simply say, hey, that's a decision, kind of like Dred Scott. That was a bigoted, wrong decision. I don't think we ought to give that a whole lot of weight. That's a decision like Buck versus Bill that said, sorry, Carrie Buck, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The state can forcibly sterilize you. That's a bigoted decision. We're not going to give it much weight. I think that's where the people ought to come, and they will come, because they see the judiciary, the judges, the Supreme Court included, acting irrationally and can no longer be literally trusted with the Constitution.
And And folks, keep in mind, this is all based upon choice. This is not a sexual orientation. It is sexual preference. It's a choice that people are making in this regard. A person cannot choose not to be the skin color that they are. They can choose their sexual behavior, though, Matt.
They can. There's no question about that. You know, I think that the twin studies have clearly shown that it is not something that you're genetically wired with. It's not something that you're born with, like your skin color. It is an environmental, it is a developmental, it is a social situation. In fact, it's very fluid. Indeed, even many adolescents that end up experimenting in this end up leaving homosexuality. There are scores of stories of people who have been changed, particularly when they meet Jesus Christ. By the power of Jesus Christ, they're freed from their sinful lifestyle.
Amen. We're going to take a quick break, and folks, we're going to delve into the next topic then on how this is pushing toward this huge push going now on transgenderism. It's taking place in the nation's schools. We'll be right back.
Yeah, so that is another aspect of the same thing, and we'll see that. But here, we need to make this point. What is happening, of course, the schools are indoctrinating. Even my own grandchildren, I have no influence over. They are so pro-homosexual or hands-off, if you will. You know, if people are like that, then that's all right. You know, just like on the Seinfeld show, you know, how they kept parroting that there's nothing wrong with that. You know, this idea, if there be homosexuals, although there's nothing wrong if that's what they choose, kind of thing. And that's reminiscent of what it was generations back when we had battles over pornography. And it turns out that, you know, the argument is the beginning of what was politically correct at that point, which has been taken to an extreme sense. But during that period of time, the argument was, well, you know, these people have a right to pornography. They have a right to have these businesses to distribute it. They have a right to publish it. See, it was all under the freedom of press. It was a big argument there. The freedom of speech was guaranteed to people, so they could produce these filthy magazines, and in whatever venue that they suppose they could distribute them. And it started downtown. They had the right to have downtown businesses. Of course, they were called peep shows before that, and they'd always been around. But the big argument was then that they had the right to sell these, and they started selling them in the grocery stores, and not just in the downtown districts and things, but in all kinds of venues. And then, of course, it started coming in movies and on television, and they had a right to do that and to have those on video, and those people who wanted it could not, their rights could not be violated. They had every right to bring those XXX rated videos into their homes and watch them. Well, of course, you know, the American people were cajoled into accepting that, and eventually, because there weren't enough of them that were morally outraged, that they didn't have the sense that they needed to stop that, it went on. And then the children of those who used those kinds of materials in their homes went many times bringing them to schools, and it got into the schools, and then of course spread with the kids in the schools that whose parents were horrified at the thought of that, but of course the kids wouldn't let them know, and so on and so forth, and thus it's just like a sewer. You know, you let the sewer contaminated water in and say, well, you can turn it off. You don't have to order those videos. You don't have to go to the video store and bring home those videos. You don't have to just turn off your TV, you know, don't buy those magazines. You do not have any right, though, to prevent these others from doing that. And so the American people were, and the Gentile people in general, all over the Gentile world, were intimidated, really, into silence. And then it's exactly what is happening now. That silence led to the pornography. Now we don't, you know, people are, it's everywhere. And it's not an issue anymore. What is an issue is the government, the laws, not just to provide free speech to people who favor these kinds of things and promote immorality, but now the laws that are forcing those who wouldn't ever do that to accept it, as we've just heard these to discuss on the Crosstalk program here. So now we're seeing businesses being forced, and soon we'll see schools. Well, we already see schools. It's happening. There's lots of incidents, and he's going to talk about it in this next part of the video that we'll listen to. But it's even becoming illegal to counsel those who want to leave homosexuality on how to do it and why to do it. So that you can see the unbalanced idea that is perpetrated in terms of what the freedom of speech means and the freedom of exercise of religion, which is in the same amendment, right? And so we see how they are taking that away, and they're doing it through the subtlety of the devil through arguments. But my point here, and I guess I really need to stress this more, is because it's just a small percentage. Yeah, it's a small percentage of the global elite, and their money is behind all these efforts, and they're paying the politicians to look the other way, and they're, you know, the money interests that are involved in making all the money from pornography. And now, of course, it doesn't just stop there. It's child trafficking, sex trafficking, and so on, and the money that's involved in there, and the money that's involved in the drugs. And we find out that it's the government that is doing a lot of that. That they have the war against drugs, but it's a war against anybody who tries to profit from the drug trade that is not them. And the big banks are laundering the money, and oh gosh, it goes on and on and on. So what the point is here that we need to understand is that the American people, in their righteous anger, as President Franklin Roosevelt said concerning the Japanese, because the American people were so outraged by the unprovoked and damnable attack of Pearl Harbor, and so the American people would rise up indignant and in their righteous anger would exact the revenge, you know, for this terrible act of war. See, if that were the leadership and the voice of the people in terms of opposing this horrible immorality, this effort to throw marriage into the trash bin of history, this effort to eradicate all boundaries, gender boundaries, and to use by force of law enforced homosexuality and so on. If they would rise up in their righteous anger and be indignant over these outrageous what would we call them? Outrageous, no, the word escapes me that I want to use, but they're acts of hubris and you know, people sometimes laugh and say, well, this is insane, this could never happen. But we see it happening, and we see they take it serious. So I'm at a loss for words right now. I should write it down, then I could probably come up with a better description of what I want to say, rather than trying to do it extemporaneously off the top of my head. but they should rise up. The American people, if they were righteous people, they remember what Tolstoy said when he wrote his thing about America, that America was great because it was good, because of the goodness of the that was flowing from the righteousness that was flowing from the pulpits of America. That's why America was great. Well, that has ceased, and if we get time, we'll play a video by Matthew Tabor, on that specifically, how it's the silence of the churches that is the problem. They should be rising up. But of course, the people don't rise up because of their iniquity. The Lord said that they would be brought down into captivity, as we just read, if they do not keep his commandments and serve him. And the land would be a land of liberty to them if they would do that. But for the wicked, it would be a cursed land, that the land would be cursed for their sakes. And that's exactly what we're seeing. These curses are coming down upon the people, and they're not outraged because they are indulging in the wickedness of their own. They may not be involved in the majority of them in the terrible wickedness that we see coming upon us, but they're being seduced, as the Nephites were, by the secret combinations, and they are being convinced, being seduced into partaking of their spoils. And it started with the later leadership, but it's spreading throughout the nation, throughout the bureaucracies. And so that's why we see what is happening. They can't, in other words, rise up in their righteous indignation, in their righteous anger, because they are not righteous. How can the righteous rise up in righteousness if they're not righteous? They can't, obviously. And so because iniquity abounds, then these curses and captivity is looming before us. This is important to understand. Well, let's go back and listen to now. Does it even get how bad it's getting in our own schools?
Listening to Crosstalk.
Facts of creation. The adding of millions of years to the plan of God is a serious error, as the majority of unbelieving scientists hold to. The secularists can't give up 2 millions of years. Need to.
Okay, I had to skip that. I had to skip the break there. I didn't edit out.
You're listening to Crosstalk on BCY America. Matt Stevers, our guest today from Liberty Counsel. And folks, we are indeed a nation in peril as we kind of do a survey approach to many of the issues that are going on right now. And friends, even as we're talking about marriage, this is going to be making its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is a conflict of opinions coming from the appellate courts at this point. Would you take time to be praying on a regular basis for this forthcoming decision, the decisions that are still going? There is so much influx going on. Every day I see this email going out from the Human Rights Campaign reporting what's going on in this state and that state, and this fight going on in this court. Their ultimate goal is for so-called same-sex marriage in all 50 states. And beyond that, to force you to not only approve of it, but to promote it as well. Matt, very much related to this issue is the decline in moral values, is this huge push on transgenderism. I mean, just last week we saw the Minnesota State High School League approve criteria for boys who wish to identify as girls and vice versa to participate on girls' sports teams. This in many locations includes access to the opposite gender's restrooms, locker rooms, hotel rooms when traveling, shower facilities. LifeSite News also ran a story here. It came out on December 3rd last week. The Obama administration has ordered schools that accept federal funding to allow people to attend single-sex lessons based on their self-identified gender identity rather than their biological sex. So the story goes on there, but this whole issue of transgenderism seems to be so focused on children, on youth, that they are being targeted. They are the victims. Your comment on this issue?
Yeah, and this is, if you go back and to look at their literature some years ago, what they said was they wanted to hold these so-called transsexuals on the sideline so that they would pull them out later once they've gotten enough ground. And because the reason is that if they brought them out too early in this whole movement of the same-sex movement, that people would push back. They just couldn't handle that. So here's where we are. Now they're starting to bring them out, and now they're starting to push for these LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender is what they call them, right? So that is ultimately the abolition of gender. You know, the whole same-sex marriage issue is saying that gender doesn't count. Boys, you don't need girls, you don't need moms and dads. They're irrelevant. Gender is irrelevant to an institution where gender is essential to that institution. Transsexualism essentially is that you can just have whatever gender or sex that you want based upon how you feel from day to day. And you can go through it in your mind only and still look like the same sex, or you can go through the hormone treatment, which is very dangerous, by the way, because you're taking high dosages of opposite hormones. If you're a man, you're taking high dosages of estrogen. If you're a woman, you're taking high doses of testosterone. That's dangerous to your health. And then you go through plastic surgery to make your exterior look like the opposite sex. That doesn't change your sex. It just simply changes your exterior appearance. You still are the same individual. But this whole transsexualism is just an abolition of gender. It is a very destructive and dangerous path on which to embark. And they are pushing this on our children. As young as first, second, third grade, they're suggesting that they ought to be able to choose their sex. I mean, you're born with your sex. You can't say, I'm going to choose to be white. I'm going to choose to be black. I'm going to choose to be Hispanic. You're born with your sex.
Actually, we're conceived with that sex, correct?
We're conceived with that sex from the moment of conception, from the moment of creation. That DNA, your chromosomes are set. And those chromosomes determine your gender. You're physiologically and biologically male or female.
Matt, also, a final rule has just been released by the Department of Labor to implement the president's executive order that requires all federal contractors to add sexual orientation and gender identity as protected categories. Family Research Council just reported that the president has, quote, unilaterally imposed upon 500,000 private employers representing 42% of the civilian workforce a legal requirement that Congress has consistently refused to impose by statute. It's in essence ENDA by executive order.
Yeah, it is. Congress has refused multiple times for many, many years when this has come up before them to pass this so-called Employment Non-Discrimination Act. What that does is it would add sexual orientation, or even the broader term gender identity, which is just a product of your mind, to the non-discrimination categories of race and gender, as I was mentioning earlier. That would have huge ramifications. Congress has never passed that, and certainly this Congress that's newly being seated in January would not pass it. But what the president has done is he's gone through his tyrannical process of issuing an executive order, and despite what Congress has refused to do, he's now telling the federal agencies and anyone who contracts with the federal government, not just the federal government itself, not just the FAA and the Food and Drug Administration, not all just those, but anyone who contracts with those agencies. They also have to have this so-called LGBT policies and practices. Otherwise, they won't be able to receive any federal contracts. In fact, there's one president of a college up in the Northeast. He signed on to a letter after this was issued by Obama, urging him to at least get an exemption for religious institutions. Well, that college had an immediately backlash. The city banned the students from participating in volunteer services with the city. And the accrediting body for that northeastern part of the country is now reevaluating whether or not this college should retain its accreditation because it has a religious belief on the issue of human sexuality. And so now they're questioning its accreditation process.
Wow. Folks, this is coming, and the issue is only going to intensify as we see it here. Matt, you're at Liberty Counsel. You've been involved in seeking court protection as well for counselors and mental health professionals who are counseling children who don't want to be practicing deviant sexual behavior or have those thoughts. What's happening with this issue?
Yeah, in California, that ban began, and then after that, we had the same thing take place in New Jersey, and we're filing a suit in both of those, but we're also recently just filed a petition to the United States Supreme Court on the New Jersey case, asking the Supreme Court to take the case because there's a conflict now among the Circuit Courts of Appeal. About a week ago, the District of Columbia passed a similar ban. We're getting ready to file a suit there as well. This is what the law says, that a licensed professional counselor cannot offer, nor can a minor client or his or her parents receive any counsel at all, that seeks to change same-sex sexual attractions, behavior, or identity, even though these are unwanted. Now, let's look at a particular case. Terry Bean was recently arrested. Terry Bean is the founder of the Human Rights Campaign, the largest pro-homosexual lobbying organization in the country. He and HRC put money into California and New Jersey to pass these bans. Well, Terry Bean was just arrested for having sex with a minor. He had a camera installed in his bedroom over his bed, and he was filming as he was having sex with men. Someone complained, and the police investigated. They found that he was actually also having sex with minors, filming that. This is the guy who's the founder of this Human Rights Campaign. This is the guy in the organization that has promoted passing these bans. So what they want to do is they want to have sex with these minor children, and when these children develop these unwanted behaviors or feelings and they need counsel to get help, they don't want them to get any counsel. They want them to be told by the counselors, it's okay, it's natural, normal, and good. Don't worry about it. Notwithstanding the fact that they do not want to engage in this kind of behavior. This is absolutely reprehensible. It's harmful to children to prevent this kind of counsel. In California, New Jersey right now also in the District of Columbia, to give any counsel like that, where the client wants to change behaviors or attractions or feelings or whatever, if you give counsel, it's considered unethical under the new law, and you will lose your license for giving such counsel.
Mm-hmm.
This
that's
is
where
what
we're at here today, and that's to show you how low.
This is what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, no doubt. That they passed laws enforcing homosexuality, enforcing things that allowed them to have sex with minors, eradicating the boundary between male and female, the gender boundaries and so on. And it's just incredible how far they've gotten, because again, the people are asleep, and they are not outraged by it, because they're not only asleep, they're engaging in they're rejecting the God of Israel. They refuse to go to church. They refuse to serve the God of Israel, which the Lord has made clear in the Voices from the Dust, that they must serve the God of Israel. They must worship the God of Israel if they're going to possess this land. And if they don't do that, then they will, the implications are that they will become wicked. They will be overcome by wickedness, and the land will be then cursed for their sake. And we see that happening. Let's listen to how, and this was back in the day way before any of this was really evident to a lot of people, but Ezra Taft Benson was explaining that. We've played several clips of his in the past, but let's play it again here. We've never played this one particularly, or this portion of it, but it's important. It's a short one. It's important for us to hear what he has to say when he was saying it back in the 80s.
That the Constitution will be saved as prophesied by Joseph Smith. But it will not be saved in Washington. It will be saved by citizens of this nation who love and cherish freedom. It will be saved by enlightened members of this church, men and women who will subscribe to it and abide the principles of the Constitution. I revere the Constitution of the United States as a sacred document. To me, the words are akin to the revelations of God, for God has placed his stamp of approval on the Constitution of this land. I testify that the God of heaven sent some of his choicest spirits to lay the foundation of this government, and he has sent other choice spirits, even you who hear my words this day, to preserve it. We, the blessed beneficiaries, face difficult days in this beloved land, a land which is choice above all other lands. It may also cost us blood before we are through. It is my conviction, however, that when the Lord comes, the stars and stripes will be floating on the breeze over this people. May it be so. And may God give us the faith and the courage exhibited by those patriots who pledged their lives and fortunes that we might be free. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Now, it was a lone voice in the wilderness in those days. There was a lot of criticism for him because of the stand that he saw and that he took. And now we see that we're deeply into this awful situation and that we are in, and it's a result of not hearing. So when I'm speaking, when I say we, it's the American people in general who are trying to wake up, but it's especially the members of this church who should have begun from that day forward and even before then to study, to see what he was talking about, what the prophet meant when he was talking about those principles of the Constitution and how the republic was to be governed by that, so that we would have been able to do our part way back then in preventing what has now happened from happening, with these banksters putting in their puppet people like Bush and Obama and Clinton and others, even going back to Carter, and the things that they were doing, which paved the way for what is happening to us now. And a lot of it also didn't have to do with just the Constitution. It had to do with understanding and being able to reason. In this next clip I'm going to play, we see this idea that I was talking about earlier, that back in the day when it was a battle over the rights of pornographers and the rights of businesses to produce and distribute it under the freedom of speech guarantees of the Constitution. It was as if they were arguing, as it was if they had the right, you see, to release sewage into society by allowing it to flow into downtown districts, from there into the homes. And as technology evolved, it went more and more into the homes, and from their homes into the schools, and then from the schools where it was spread among the children in the schools, and inevitably made its way back into the homes of the righteous from there. It's just as if you were allowed, you were permitted by the Constitution, this is the irony of it, you were permitted by the Constitution to contaminate society. But now you're not permitted by the Constitution, or you're not enabled by the Constitution to bear arms. They're trying to take that away, but you're not enabled by the Constitution to, for instance, to photograph the police in their acts. You're not enabled by the Constitution to speak your mind freely. You're not enabled by the Constitution to do all of the things that we've been talking about this morning in terms of rejecting immorality, rejecting what Lindsey Williams says that the elite call the devil's Messiah. And he predicted a lot of, he doesn't talk much anymore. You don't hear him because he was told how the energy costs were going to go sky high, and how the dollar was going to come to an end in 2012, and all the other things that he said, and it didn't happen. But I think the reason it didn't happen is because the elite themselves were battling. That's what they had intended on bringing to pass. But things have happened, and they're coming apart in a lot of ways. Their plans are coming apart. And so we see now, instead of energy prices hitting the roof, we see oil at an all-time low. And that has embarrassed Lindsey. And instead of the dollar being dead, which it really is, but they are pumping it up by printing, you know, in a virtual sense, printing trillions of dollars, which eventually is going to destroy the dollar, but right now makes it look like it's, you know, gosh, you can buy a lot of oil and you can buy a lot of goods with the dollar, right? It's just incredible. Look at what's happened to the stock market. It's like gone sky high. And so people won't believe you now. They don't believe Lindsey Williams because of all the prophecies that he was making have not come to pass. It's been exactly the opposite. They're saying oil is headed to $60 a gallon, $60 a barrel. Here it is. Last time I looked, and when I filled up my gas tank, it was, I think, $2.76 a gallon. That's incredible, you know, and if it keeps going down, some are saying it's going to go to less than $2 a gallon. But in the meantime, the price of butter is $5 a pound, and meat is sky high. Everything is just crazy because they are manipulating everything, see, for their ideological purposes. They are manipulating. When I say they, the global elite, we could name them. They are manipulating politics. They are manipulating economics. They are manipulating the courts. And as Staver was just explaining. And so everything is just totally like crazy. Nobody can understand or make any sense out of it. And so they turn off, I think. But and don't want to be engaged. But as a result, it's going to finally affect them. They're not going to be able to escape. But like I was saying, the pornography argument, we don't hear much about it except, you know, for the prophet saying don't get into it. But there's no battle to keep it out of society now because of the internet and it's everywhere. There's no way to stop it now. And so it was like pouring sewer into the streets that's has contaminated all of society. But now, instead of being cajoled into compromising with evil, we are being forced by government. Instead of the argument being that the Constitution should permit evil to have its rights, we are now being forced by these same people to accept the fact that the Constitution will not enable us to have our rights. So it's been turned around. Last week, I had the opportunity to explain D&C Section 101 to 2 ordinance workers in the temple. When things were slow, we got to talking about it. And of course, they didn't know it. And they haven't understood all of it yet. I haven't got to the part where it's going to talk about the breaking down of the hedge and the breaking and destruction of the works of the servants and the breaking down of the 12. And but we'll get to that. But at any rate, I wanted to show just how the American people, because they don't stand up and because their leaders don't articulate their arguments, and even if they do, they're not accepted or not well known. I wanted to play this clip, which reminded me of the days back in the battle over pornography and the rights of pornographers, the rights of evil to be able to have their free speech. We had the argument that it would contaminate all of society, that society has a right to protect itself. But like I said, nobody really made that argument and people didn't care, so it didn't go very far. Now, the same kind of thing we're going to see in this next clip where a man is arguing for same-sex marriage, and it's made very clear, and I'm not even sure who this is that is speaking, but he logically makes the right argument, you know, that society, again, has the right to protect itself, and that if we followed the arguments of same-sex marriage advocates, we would be finding ourselves in hot water, because it really undefines, if you will. That's not a word he uses, but the redefinition of marriage just simply renders it meaningless. And society then has a right to protect itself against that. It has a vested interest. I made that argument to a couple of homosexual couple here 5 or 6 years ago, and when I was in their home and I was arguing with them over this, and I simply said society has a right to protect itself against these kinds of ideologies that would destroy it, you know, essentially. And so let's see how he makes that argument in this same-sex marriage. Doesn't make exactly the same argument that I made, but nevertheless, the essence is there.
It's pretty timely because April 15th is just around the corner. So my question is really about the government's interest in taxes, and the government's interest in marriage, which I think the government's pretty interested in taxes. If I'm wrong, please correct me. So
they're too interested in taxes. That's the problem.
I agree. I agree. So my question is, why should I not have the right to file a joint tax return? Why should I pay more taxes than a straight couple simply because I'm a minority? How is that not discrimination?
Sure. And that's a fair question. What if we were to say, why should I not be able to file a joint tax return just because I'm in a throuple or a quartet? I mean, so it seems to me what you're suggesting is that we just shouldn't have the tax code recognize marriage. No. So then you think that we should have same-sex marriage for same-sex couples, but would you also extend marriage equality rights to the throuple?
So my question really is, why should I, as a gay man, be denied the same right to file a joint tax return with my potential husband that a straight couple?
And I want to play out what principle you're acting on, because I would hope that you're not just doing special pleading, that you want protection for your rights, but not for all Americans' rights. So I would hope that you wouldn't be saying that you want special tax treatment, but I don't care about the throuple. So I want to see what principle you're acting on, and does the principle that you're hoping to vindicate to protect your rights also extend to protect the rights of the throuple?
Sure. So I'm acting on civil rights, and so the rights that are applicable to a male and female couple are applicable to a male and male couple, and that's my question. How is that not discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation?
Well, right. So part of the answer is that because the same-sex couple isn't a marriage, and so that we want marriage equality to treat all marital relationships in the same way. And given the understanding I've presented of what marriage is, same-sex relationship isn't marital. But I'm trying to ask you about the equal protection argument you're making. Would it apply to all consenting adult romantic relationships? So why would you want the same-sex couple to file jointly for taxes, but not the same-sex throuple or the opposite-sex quartet?
Sure. I appreciate that. And that's not I'm sorry, but that's not actually my question. My question is, why should I be denied The
Right,
right
because, all right,
to
so sorry,
file
then
it.
I'll answer your question. The reason that you should not have the option of filing a joint tax return is because
That's my
you
question.
can't get married. Given
But
what
I can in
marriage
California.
is,
I can get
given
married.
you can be issued a marriage license in the state of California, but you can't actually get married. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but given what marriage is, a
And how
union
is
of
that not
sexually
discrimination?
complementary, and it's not discrimination because everyone is equally eligible for entering into the marital relationship where you understand marriage as a union of sexually complementary spouses, a permanent exclusive union of man and woman, husband and wife, mother and father. If you're not interested in entering into that sort of a union, you're not being discriminated against. What you're asking us to do is to redefine marriage to include the adult relationship of your choice. And the adult relationship of your choice happens to be a same-sex couple. There are other adults who want to have marriage redefined to include the relationship of their choice, which may be the same-sex throuple or the opposite-sex quartet. And so what I'm asking you in response is, what principle are you appealing to when you say this is discrimination to vindicate your rights but not their rights? Because it seems to me that your position ultimately leads to simply the dissolvement of the marital union.
Sure. So there's other speakers in line, so we can always talk at lunch. But I just want to clarify. I just heard you do not have the right to get married. So if you could tell me why I don't have the right to get married, that would be my final question.
Sure.
Thank
yeah,
you.
I mean,
and I'll sit down.
I mean, I feel like we have 5 minutes left, so I'll just say this again briefly. I feel like I've already answered that. It's not that you don't have a right to get married. It's that you aren't seeking out marriage. Marriage is by nature a union of sexually complementary spouses, a union of man and woman, husband and wife, mother and father. And just based upon what you've said about yourself, it doesn't sound like you're interested in forming that sort of a union. It sounds like you're interested in forming a union with another man, and that's not a marriage. So that's why I don't think the law should treat the relationship that you want to form as a marriage. Who is next?
Man, that was really good. You see, what he's saying there is that the argument that the homosexuals have is, what if they were arguing that we should take two pipes? Two pipes ought to be able to be coupled together, one being male and the other being male as well. You know, and they're saying, well, there should be some way that we could do that. Well, you could have a coupler that has a female end on both ends, female connection on both ends, a coupler like that. So then you could connect the male to the female on that end, and you could connect the male to the female on that end. I think that's what throuple means, right? But that's the only way you could do that. So you couldn't, without that female, you could not connect two male pipes with two male connections together. This is impossible. You can't do it. So what he's saying is that a marriage by definition is this coupling together. And you're wanting to define this as something else that actually just goes away because it redefines marriage. It redefines coupling, if you will, in a way that makes it impossible to couple. Marriage means a family and children and that kind of thing, and you can't accomplish that. Now, that was essentially my argument. I said that to my friends, homosexual couple friends, that the society has a right to protect itself, so marriage becomes a privilege. It is not a right. It's not a civil right. It's a privilege where, like the plumber in the house is going to say that, hey, we cannot try in some way to couple these two pipes together with just male or just female connections. It won't work. And it's not going to be really helpful for our building to try to get around that somehow and make that work. It just doesn't happen. So society says, no, we've got these standards, and these standards are one male and one female constitutes a coupling, constitutes a marriage. Now, if you want to go out and try to do it in some other way, you're welcome to do that, but you can't call it a coupling. You can't call it a marriage, a sound coupling that will bind those two together properly unless one is male and the other is female. So there you go. There you have it. But we don't make those arguments. And as a result, we don't understand them either. And as a result, we are losing the battle even in the courts. But I want to play this next clip of Tabor explaining this aspect of it, where we are silent and the churches are silent, and because of that, we are going down the road to our destruction. So let me see what I'm doing. I can't think. All right, here we go.
Hi, I'm Matt Tabor. I'm standing in front of the United States Supreme Court in our nation's capital. It's an awe-inspiring building. It's even more awesome inside, where I've had the opportunity to argue before the High Court. This court decides issues that affect our life and liberty, freedom of speech, free exercise of religion. The issues that are decided by this court have spiritual, moral, and political consequences. Each generation has a duty to pass on liberty to the next generation. It's not transferred in our DNA. Pastors and church leaders and leaders of nonprofit organizations have the awesome opportunity and responsibility to speak truth to the culture in each generation. But oftentimes pastors and church leaders are confused with misinformation, and they're paralyzed because they think that speaking the truth that has political consequences will somehow jeopardize their tax-exempt status. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the issues and dispel the myths so that you can exchange the muzzle for a megaphone and speak truth to this generation. Join me in our journey as we go into the United States Supreme Court. I'm standing in the Supreme Courtroom, not in the nation's capital, but at Liberty University School of Law, where we have a replica of the exact bench in the Supreme Court of the United States. We created this Supreme Courtroom so that it represents the symbol of the rule of law. It also represents a symbol of the departure of the rule of law, and it's a challenge to our